السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله العلي الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى. أشهد أنه لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صاحب المقام المعلى. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. صدق الله العظيم. Honorable scholars, respected brothers, one day a Sahabi came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he said, Ya Rasulullah, akhbirni bi'amalin, tell me about such an action that will grant me acceptance into Jannah. We are eternally indebted to Sahaba for the quality of the questions that they asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Their questions were of such a caliber that up to the end of time, humanity will continue to benefit from the answers which Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to those questions posed by the Sahaba. A second principle we can learn is scholars tell us the nature of the question of a person is indicative of the priorities of that person. Now look at the priority of the Sahabi. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I want the roadmap, I want the blueprint, I want the recipe for success, which is entry into Jannah. Because Allah says in the Quraan, everyone may have their own definition of what is success, but Allah says, فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ. If you can ensure that you don't end up in the hellfire and you secure your entry into Jannah, then that is success. So in a short question, he asked such an important topic that, Ya Rasulullah, tell me what is that one critical category of actions that will secure me eternal salvation and success, that will guarantee me my entrance into Jannah. So the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam told him, Ta'budullaha wa la tushriku bihi shay'a. The foundation of everything is Tawheed, belief in the oneness of Allah. The greatest manifestation of Tawheed was tuqim as-salah, that you establish salah. That is the greatest right of Allah upon you in terms of that which you have to do for Allah. When it comes to what you have to do for your fellow humans, wa tu'ti az-zakah, give them of that charity which is compulsory for you to give. وَتَصِلُ الرَّحِمِ, and maintain family ties. Maintain family ties. Now, I started with this hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to highlight the importance of the topic up front. Sometimes certain topics we gravitate. If perhaps it was written on the board that we were going to talk about Andrew Tate, then there may have been a greater gravitation. And other topics we feel, okay, it's important, but you know what? I understand what it's all about. I know the ahadith pertaining to this. I know the Quranic ayat pertaining to this. And so it may be, you can't manufacture new ayat because you're trying to make your topic more contemporary. Nor can you create new ahadith. But as circumstances evolve, the reminder becomes all the more important. And this is one of the most important contemporary discussions because of the nature of the life that we live today. We no longer live how our forebears used to live. Not too long ago, just a couple of decades back, where the family unit was solid, where the family structure remained intact, where everyone made an effort to enhance familial relations. Today, the nature of the lifestyle that has dominated the world has eaten away at that family structure. And this is so important because when the Sahabi asked Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tell me those things which are fundamental, which I require for success in this world as well as in the hereafter, which I require to secure my entry into Jannah. After Tawheed, Salah and Zakah, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions family relations. It's a hallmark of a believer. Like I said, the ahadith are not new, you have heard them. But it's about reminding us and reminding ourselves as to how important this is. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, it is the hallmark of a believer, فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ, that he is hospitable to his guest. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيَصِلْ رَحِمَهُ. If you truly believe in Allah in the last day, then the proof of your belief is to the extent that you will establish and maintain and sustain family ties. In another narration, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, and our honorable esteemed scholar alluded to this. The Nabi of Allah understood the psyche and the psychology of a human. You meet any human, Muslim, Christian, Jew, agnostic, atheist, whatever. He wants to live long and he wants prosperity in his life. I'm yet to meet a man unless he's got some very acute difficulty, then he wants his life to come to an end. But generally speaking, every human doesn't want his life to end. And not only does he want to live the longest possible life, he wants the best possible life. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you want for there to be expansion in your sustenance, and if you want for there to be an extension to your life, then maintain family ties. If Jannah is something too distant for you, as things stand, if you're just worried about the immediate, you want to prolong your life, and you want to extend the prosperity in your life, start with establishing, sustaining and maintaining family ties. There are different interpretations which the muhaddithin have given here. I'm not going to go too much into the academic side of it, but what they say is, it does not necessarily mean that if you were to live for 60, you'll live for 80. It means Allah will grant you greater barakah in whatever life has already been decreed for you. And that's the missing ingredient. That's the missing ingredient, barakah. Because let me tell you, even if you live to 100 and only a handful of people live to 100, you'll still feel it's not enough time. So whether it's 80 or 100 or 180, it will never be enough. What is required is barakah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us, you want barakah in your life. And by extension, the scholars tell us, you want barakah in your progeny, then maintain family ties. You will notice that those people whose progeny Allah looks after long after their eyes have closed, they had the habit of maintaining good relations with their relatives. So this is something that brings you barakah in your life, it brings you benefit in the year after, and it creates and sustains for you a legacy long after you have left this world. And that's why the second part of the hadith which says about prosperity, right? So prosperity means barakah whilst you are alive. But extension of life, one is that you'll have more barakah, but the other is that your legacy and your good name, your profile and your reputation, Allah will preserve it for a prolonged period of time through the barakah of maintaining family ties. Today we live in a PR world. I mean, companies hire specialists. People are obsessed with their social media profile. They spend money on someone writing the bio for a social media page. It's all about how I'm known and what my reputation is like. You sue people, there are defamation cases for millions based on reputational damage. Allah is saying, you want me to look after your profile, you want me to look after your reputation, look after your family. Look after your family. I'll grant you barakah in your rizq. And rizq is not only money. Rizq means everything that we require to sustain ourselves. Health is rizq, ilm is rizq, the air you breathe is rizq. So Allah says, I'll give you barakah in your rizq, I'll grant you barakah in your life. What you can do in a year, others will take 10 years to do. And I'll look after your name long after your eyes have closed. I'll look after your name long after your eyes have closed. You know, I'll share with you something. Allah has blessed me. I travel, here and there a bit. And wherever I go, I observe this one thing. That 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, people don't talk about the richest man who has passed on. They don't talk about the most knowledgeable man who has passed on. They talk about the most hospitable man, the man with the biggest heart and the man with the most time for others. Many places I go, people will say, Mama, you see that boy there, his grandfather, wow, he was very hospitable. He was a man of the community. He had great love. He looked after his family. They don't tell you about, his grandfather was the richest man in our town. Or his grandfather was the greatest alim or mufti or qari of our town. No, his great-grandfather or great-grandfather was a hospitable man, was a man of quality, was a man of substance, was a man of heart. And if you look after your family relations, then you are a man of character, a man of quality, a man of heart. And it makes me think of this hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Allah looks after your profile. Allah looks after your reputation. Family ties, brothers, is not transactional. There's no quid pro quo. No tit for tat. You do, I do. You don't do, I ain't gonna do. No. That whole concept is alien to Islam. Not only in terms of family ties, but in terms of everything. You do or you don't do, that's between you and Allah. If I don't do, then I have to answer for Allah. And if I do, then my reward is with Allah. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Laysa al-wasilu bil mukafi." Family ties is not, you visit me, I visit you. You help me, I help you. You keep ties with me. I can't speak authoritatively with regards to your community because I pop in, pop out, just come and go. But in our community, it's a common thing, especially amongst the women. They didn't invite us to their daughter's wedding. Why must we invite them? His son got married, he invited 500 people, he forgot our names. Now you want to, now husband and wife are arguing. No, why must we invite? They don't think of us. Family ties is not transactional. It's not transactional. That's why the esteemed scholar quoted the hadith, "La yadkhulul jannata qati'an." See, this topic is as important as it gets because it can make the difference between you getting into Jannah and not getting into Jannah. That's the long and short of it. The world that we live in today is a self-obsessed world. The other day I was saying to a friend of mine, people used to lament that nowadays the man only says, "Me and my wife and kids." I say, even that is gone. It's me. Full stop. There was a time not too long ago, the man was only obsessed with securing what he needed to secure for himself, his wife and his kids. Right? So the parents would lament, he forgot us. The siblings would lament. Now the wife and children are lamenting, he's forgotten us. It's just me. That's the nature of the world that we live in. A very hedonistic culture. أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. The Qur'an warns us about this. There's a man who makes sajda to Allah, and then there's the man who makes sajda to his nafs. Anything the nafs wants, he's pursuing it. He desires it. And that man doesn't care about anyone or anything. He just cares about fulfilling his desires. And that kind of a lifestyle has permeated. That kind of a lifestyle has spread like a cancer. It's entered the homes of the Muslim. It's entered the homes of the pious. It's entered the homes of the knowledgeable. We are self-centric, self-centered, individualistic, selfish human beings that live in a so-called enlightened age. And we don't realize the greatest losers are us ourselves. Because Allah only wants for you what is good for you. Allah only wants for you what is good for you. I was addressing a group of youth the other day, and I said, one of the common objections that the agnostic or the atheist has, why does God need me to worship Him? That very premise is faulty. That presupposition is incorrect. What makes you think that if Allah instructed you to worship Him, that Allah needs your worship? If you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you go on a diet, does the doctor need you to go on a diet for him? If the doctor instructs you, take your insulin, it's an instruction. And he cautions you, don't take your insulin, don't come back here. Does the doctor need the benefit of your insulin? The doctor is instructing you for your sake. So Allah says, you should worship me for your sake. I don't need your worship. Similarly, Allah when tells us to maintain family ties, there's nothing that Allah benefits. Allah is beyond that. Yes, those with whom we maintain ties, they benefit, but the greatest recipient of the benefit is us ourselves. Not only in terms of reward, but in terms of happiness and emotional fulfillment. You see, Allah has created us. Allah is the manufacturer. Allah has the manufacturer's manual. We don't. And Allah tells us, I've created you such you can't live by yourself and for yourself. The greatest happiness you will have in life is when you do for others, especially those closest to you. That is the very basic that our ignorant, unqualified, uneducated forefathers understood, which we have failed to understand with all of our sophistication and all of our education. A human is not an island. You can't live for yourself, you can't live by yourself. I'll mention one more point in this regard, And that is, when we sit in talks of this nature, then one of the very shrewd tactics of the devil is to make us absorb whatever is being said, to agree with it, but to apply it to someone else. Oh, what Maulana said, I hope he's hearing. What Maulana described fits 100% on his behavior. The devil is rather smart in his modus operandi. Doesn't, some people he knows he keeps them away. Other people say, no, go listen. But don't apply it to yourself, apply it to someone else. So it's almost as if you were not there. There is room for improvement for every one of us. There is room for improvement for every one of us. Most of you are familiar with Mufti Menk. So one day someone asked him, what would you say is the recipe of this progress which Allah has given you? He said, I have one philosophy in life. Whenever I meet any other human, no matter who he is or what he is, I make an intention that before I leave him, I must learn at least one thing from him. And I've read somewhere that my memory is vague in this regard, but there's a similar statement attributed to Ali radiallahu anhu, a giant of knowledge. A giant. Umar radiallahu anhu used to say that the knowledge of all Sahaba can be found in 6, and the knowledge of all 6 can be found in 2, Ali and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Yet Ali radiallahu anhu had this philosophy in life that whenever I meet anyone, let me try and learn something from him which I don't know. You can't know everything. You can't. Some people will teach you something about dunya. Some people will teach you something about deen. Some people will teach you something about society and community. Muslim, non-Muslim, young, old, pious, impious, everyone has got something if you just look for it with the right intention. So our Akabir tell us that you must sit in a talk to see how can I benefit myself? How can I improve? Because Allah is not going to question me about the next man's actions or intentions. I lie in my own grave, I'll be questioned about my own actions and intentions. So when we talk about family ties, let me see how I can become better as a son, as a daughter, as a father, as a sibling, as a cousin, in whichever sense, in whichever context. How can I, not let me judge that man, he's broken family ties, let me, that one's wife took him away from his siblings, that one's this. No, everyone has to answer for their deeds. I'm going to answer for my deeds. How can I become better? Because I will have to stand before Allah and then answer for my deeds. Now, if you look at the poster that was prepared, it's multifaceted in terms of the topic. It's not, I just, as an introduction, highlighted some of what is there in the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of the importance of family ties. But if we break it down, there's the marital aspect, there's the parental aspect, there's the sibling aspect, there's the immediate family aspect, there's the extended family aspect. I'll try and share a few thoughts on each one of those categories, inshallah. But let me start with the foundation. This is a very important point which I mention quite often when I'm solemnizing and performing a nikah. One day a friend of mine is a businessman. And Allah has granted him such tawfiq. He's a very high level business person. He trades in oil. But he's got this amazing shauq to do da'wah. Wherever he goes in the world to do his business, he's always inviting non-Muslims to Islam. And a number of people have accepted Islam because of him. So on one occasion he called me, there was a young white couple, they had some questions about Islam and they wanted to know the usual stuff, women's rights in Islam and all of those kind of things. And we had a discussion and we spoke, and alhamdulillah, both husband and wife accepted Islam. Now one day during his travels, he met a colleague and he was speaking to this colleague about Islam. And his colleague told him, I'm ready to become Muslim. There's just one thing. I have a partner, me and my partner, we live together. We didn't see why there's a need to get married. Whether you get married Christian style or Jewish style or Muslim style, why? I mean, if I commit to her and she commits to me and we have an understanding, why do we have to come into a mosque or into a synagogue or into a church and the priest or the pastor or the alim says a few words and we say a few words and you sign a document? What? It doesn't make sense to me logically. That why do you have to formalize something which is a matter of the heart? You see how people think. So he rings me up and he says that, how do I answer him? So I told him, you don't need naqli, you need aqli. You can't tell him this ayat, that hadith. He's not a Muslim. You're going to give him some sort of a logical answer. Now where do you find a logical answer? So I told him, give me some time, let me think about it. Anyway, the long and short of it is this. There are different answers, but this answer which was most appealing to me, I want to share with you because it applies to the context of this discussion. When two humans come together, right? Hopefully Adam and Eve, right? When two humans come together, for them, it may be an issue of physical fulfillment, emotional fulfillment, and financial fulfillment. But that's not what marriage is about in Islam. Marriage is the bedrock of a prosperous society. So Allah wants marriages to be stable so that families can be stable. And if families are stable, communities will be stable. And if communities are stable, then the ummah will be stable. Therefore, there's so much of emphasis put on marriage. Because when you prosper in your marriage, you will prosper as an ummah. But if you're not prospering in your marriage, you can never prosper in ummah. Unity doesn't start from the top down, it starts from the bottom up. It doesn't happen at a macro level, it happens at a micro level. So as long as we can't get our marriages in order, our families will never be in order. If families are not in order, communities can't be in order. And if communities are not in order, forget having the entire ummah united, it's a pipe dream. Now, if we understand that point, then we will understand that Allah says you have to make nikah. Why? Because the coming together of a man and woman is not only for the sake of a man and woman. It's for the sake of two families. It's for the sake of a community. It's for the sake of the ummah. Therefore, it's not like when you buy a car, willing buyer, willing seller. You don't need an alim, you don't need a nikah book, you don't need witnesses. You happy with the price, I'm happy with the price. That's transactional. The benefit or the harm is limited to those two individuals. But marriage is not transactional. The benefit or the harm extends to the family, to the community, to the ummah. Hence Allah says, you have to make a commitment to me to treat her well. And she has to make a commitment to me to treat you well. And you have to come into my house to formalize that commitment. It may take only 30 seconds to say nakahtuha wa qabiltuha, but it's a commitment to Allah for the prosperity of families, communities and the ummah. So that's where it starts. Marriages and families are not only for the benefit of the individuals there. Today we lament the state of the ummah throughout the world, but we forget that the solution starts with us. If you can't mend the fence with your brother, if you can't let go of the grudge with your cousin, if you can't forgive someone who shares a blood relation with you, then where will you see prosperity in the ummah? Where will you see prosperity in the ummah? Because that's the foundation. That's the root. And we have to understand that point. The second aspect, parents. Now let me also mention an important point here. When we talk about parents, then the elderly and the middle age look at the youth. They're very mastan, they're very mischievous. And of course, because that's an age when you're somewhat rebellious and mischievous. But what about middle-aged people and how they treat their elderly parents? Does it not also apply? If you are a parent yourself, the obligation in terms of how you treat your parents doesn't fall away. Doesn't fall away. You may now become a professional, an alim, a scholar, someone in your own right, but your parent is still your parent, your father is still your father, your mother is still your mother. It's an independent discussion, and there isn't much that I can tell you that you don't know in terms of what the Qur'an says and what the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say. But the one point I want to bring into focus, the Nabi of Allah said, "Raghima anfu," woe unto that person. Thumma raghima anfu, thumma raghima anfu. That man or that woman who finds both parents or one of their parents in old age and does not serve them so excessively that they enter into Jannah as a result of that khidmah. What is the hadith telling us? Not that you just give your mother a good home, a good bed, a good servant, the best medical care. No. You must make so much of khidmah of your parents, especially in their old age, that it must become your ticket to Jannah. If your parents are in old age and you don't secure your entry into Jannah, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam has cursed you. You can't do the basic. You've got to make so much of effort that you must be confident, inshallah, now I've got my parents' du'as and I've got Allah's blessings. And this will be, because if your parents are in old age, it's an opportunity for you to secure Jannah. In the majority of cases, people have good intentions and they take care of the basics. Hardly in our community especially will you find parents whose children put them to the streets. There are cases, I'm not saying they aren't, I'm talking about the general trend. In our country, most parents, grandparents, their children, grandchildren will give them the best of homes, or nice en suite, or granny's cottage within their own home. Will hire help. Okay, here in UK, labor is expensive, but us is not. So that's why our women folk don't want to settle here. They're too used to having assistance. Now you have to use PC, politically correct languages, so even you have to say my domestic helper. Anyway, the good language is nothing wrong with that. Islam teaches us that if you use words that makes people feel better, then use those words. Whatever your view may be on another word. But anyway, so the best of roof, meaning accommodation, the best of food, the best of medical care, doctors, specialists, everything. But the complaint of people in the old age is not of financial neglect, it's not of physical neglect, it's of emotional neglect. That this chokra of mine, he's got a lot of money, he's given me a nice granny's cottage, best of doctors, best of helpers, best of assistants, but he doesn't have time to talk to me. Ma assalamu alaikum kyam cho, ma assalamu alaikum, I'm going, that's it. Just in out. Not intentionally, no one means bad, it's just that rat race of life. The world that we live in, where everything is so artificial, superficial, so vain, so material. You're always pursuing instant gratification. It's ajeeb, the world we live in. Not too long ago, our grandparents in the Gam, they had to wake up in the morning, chase the chicken, catch the chicken, slaughter the chicken, defeather the chicken, clean the meat, wash the meat, then marinate the meat, then cook the meat, then you had lunch. Today you pop into the store, you buy a sachet, you pop it into a microwave, you have the same chicken lunch. Instant. So everything, we want instant gratification. Everything has become easier, but life has become more difficult. Communication is easier. Hajj time I said, you know what, when my father went for Hajj, we had to wait once a week when he could find a payphone. I remember my grandfather writing him a letter and sending it with those who went later. Today they give you ball by ball commentary for every round of tawaf. Now we're in the first round. Okay, we're done with tawaf now, we're just supposed to take a selfie, then we're going to Safa Marwa. Alright, I'm busy cutting my hair. So communication has become easier. My nana went for Hajj from South Africa on a ship. Today you hop on a plane 6 hours later from Johannesburg to Jeddah. But you have far more complaints of the Hujjaj now than you heard then. Life has become easier, but it's become more difficult. It's the paradox of our times. So we emotionally neglect our parents. You see, when you become older, more than you need food and medical care, you need reassurance that you're still relevant. The greatest test of a person post-retirement is that they feel they no longer matter. Now, I know there's a generational gap. The father built the business for his children. Then he hands over the business to the children. They feel, right, now we've got to take in a different direction. New strategies, new tactics. And the old man wants the old way, so we just keep him a little bit out. And I can understand that, but do it in a manner that doesn't make him feel totally irrelevant. They don't need me anymore. My opinion doesn't count. As people age, it's a Quranic concept. Allahu alladhi khalaqakum min du'af, thumma ja'ala min ba'di du'fin quwwa, thumma ja'ala min ba'di quwwatin du'fa wa shayba. Sometimes people in old age, physically, they can still walk. One day when I was talking about this, one Baji got a bit angry on the radio. He phoned me. He said, Maulana, I can race you down the road and I'll beat you. So one thing about people when they reach an elder age, don't argue. I said, no, you 100% you'll beat me. But that's not the point I was saying. This year applies more mentally and emotionally than it applies physically. Yes, physically sometimes the elder you get, then your body starts to become frail and your back starts to become hunched and now you can't perform sajda anymore and you can't walk that much. But not to everyone. Sometimes people are physically very fit, even in old age. But mentally and emotionally, it's not a criticism, it's a fact of life. You start retrogressing, more impatient, more stubborn. And this is when Allah says how they made sabr with you when you were impatient and stubborn as a toddler. You don't say it's 2 a.m. in the morning, I can't disturb my mother. My mother is sick, I can't wail and cry. Similarly, you've got to become equally patient with your elderly amongst your family when they reach a time when their faculties start to diminish and retrogress. That's the time you've got to talk to them. Now sometimes we may feel every time we sit and talk with Nana or Nani, they're making That repeats, same stories. In our time like this, in our time like that. That is their sense of relevance. That is their experience that they want to share with you. Like the young kid who carries on asking his father, but what's this? What's this? Same question. Father had to repeat the answer over and over, but never lost his patience. He understood this is a kid. You have to understand, people in the twilight of their years, they sometimes just want to talk. They forget that they have spoken the same thing. They repeat themselves, but you've got to have the patience to make them feel special and make them feel relevant. Of course, your decisions are yours. Whose proposal you accept for your daughter is your right. But bring them in the process somehow. This proposal has come, we're thinking about it. You also make istikharah. You make dua. Make dua that Allah guides us towards the right decision. Not that she finds out from some second cousin, your granddaughter is about to get fixed. And she lives in the same house. Then your wife says, but no, it's not her business. It's my daughter. No, of course, that is on its place. But make people, just mentally do a switch. That if I was on the other side, how would I feel? If I was on the other side, how would I feel? So acknowledge the elderly. Whether it's your parent, grandparent, uncle, auntie, the elderly. I'm talking about the generation before you or perhaps 2 generations before you. Some of us, maybe our grandparents are still alive. Listen to them and connect with them emotionally. Connect with them emotionally. Because the right of a parent is such that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has said, Inna abarra al-bir ayyasila rajul wudda abi. That your father has such a right over you, that even after his eyes have closed, you must be good to your father's friends. Imagine the status of a father that even after his eyes have closed, forget looking after your mother, you must look after and you must be good and you must acknowledge and you must respect and you must give acknowledgement to those whom were the acquaintances of your father when he was alive. Recently, I gave a talk in my masjid, and it's a separate talk. I'll just mention 2 or 3 points in passing. It's about, inadvertently, we don't give fathers their due. We must understand, there's a hadith where, and we all know, Al-Jannatu tahta aqdamil ummahat. The Jannah is beneath the feet of mothers. Now, what is in the world, those who have an issue with patriarchy, they promote matriarchy to such an extent that it diminishes the role of the father. That's one thing on a philosophical level. But even those who understand the dynamics of an Islamic system, right? Inadvertently, we show so much of respect to our mothers, which is due, but we forget to adequately acknowledge our fathers. We forget to adequately acknowledge our fathers. One father lamented and said, my children will always compliment my wife about the meal, but they'll never compliment me for breaking my back so that we could afford the meal that my wife cooked in the first place. You see, Allah has created men and women equal but not identical. Remember this principle. Allah has created men and women such that the relationship must be complementary, not competitive. This is where humanity is losing the track. We say men and women, equality means that you must be the same. There's no beauty in sameness. And at the same time, the relationship is not meant to be competitive, it's meant to be complementary. One scholar so beautifully gives the example, he says, the greatest insult to a woman is to judge her by the barometer of a man. And then say to her, the more you become like a man, the more you are worthy of acknowledgement and the more you perceive to be enlightened and free. That's the greatest insult to a woman because you're judging her by the barometer of a man. Society has become so illogical in its deductions. If a woman decides to become an air hostess, and I'm not saying this in a pejorative sense about, air hostess, it's just an example, and she decides to walk up and down a narrow aisle, speaking to people she doesn't know and she doesn't care about, who don't know her and don't care about her, and whole day she's saying tea, coffee, chicken, beef, that woman is liberated. But if that same woman decides, you know what, let me stay at home and offer tea or coffee or chicken or beef to those people who love me and whom I love, then that woman is orthodox, she's backward, and she's shackled. We don't have a problem with women's rights. We don't have a problem with giving women their due. That is why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came. To liberate women. One of the basic and fundamental things that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did in the pagan society. It's about how you define these things and in which direction you take it. So, Many times we acknowledge our mothers because our mothers have more of an emotional connection with us, but we fail to adequately acknowledge our fathers. Think about it. You say, Mom, wow, your biryani is delicious. Who paid for the ingredients to make the biryani? Was his work not tiresome? You see, I read a beautiful example. They say when you drive a motor car, all right? So what are you interfacing with? What are you interacting with? The steering wheel, accelerator, brake pedal, gear levers. So after a while, your sense of a car is that. Accelerator, gear pedals, all that. But what's driving the car? The engine. And in today's cars, silently. You don't even know it's there. So your mother is the one who gives you your clothes. Your mother is the one who nurtures you when you're sick. Your mother is the one who gives you your medication. Your mother is the one who gives you the food. Your mother is the one who will phone 2 times an hour, buy you dressed warm, you took your clothes. So you start to think my mother is doing everything. Who's the power behind it? Who's the engine behind it? Who's the engine behind it? One man lamented to me, say, one Musalli of ours, he passed away now, marhum. He was about 80 odd and he divorced his wife, who was also 80 odd. So his son called me and said, Shaykh, this is now an embarrassing situation for us. He got into a fit of rage and, whatever happened. Anyway, I went there and now the children were very angry at the old man for what he did, and it created a problem now in old age. And they were interacting and each one was saying what they needed to say, and he was very regretful and remorseful that I shouldn't have done it. But the one child made a remark and said, my mother did everything for us. My mother brought us up. My mother funded our university education. My father did nothing, now in old age he did this also. And you could just see that hit, man, it hit. So later on, obviously, I spoke to them individually, spoke to him individually, and when I spoke to him, he said, man, everything they say is right. What I did here, I shouldn't have done. But that statement is hurting. He says, I paid the fees. My wife did some home industry, she was giving the spending. The pocket money, I paid the fees. I paid the rent. I bought the clothes. And today, my educated children are saying that my wife brought them up and I did nothing. You see, even your education sometimes doesn't guide you to this basic reality. You're interfacing with your mother, but the power behind it is your father. There are exceptions. Those men who are abusive, those men who derelict and they don't fulfill their responsibilities and don't pay their maintenance, that's a separate matter. Those men, their behavior stands condemned from an Islamic perspective. You don't need any legality to tell you that. But I'm saying the general man feels underappreciated by his own children while his children are still in his home. He feels underappreciated, not adequately acknowledged. Men by nature can't show as much emotion as women do. But that doesn't mean they love you any less. Because the average man will spend 90% of what he earns on his family and not on himself. They say the quality of your father is not in him taking care of you when you're sick, or cooking you a hot meal, or making sure you got freshly ironed clothes. The quality of your father is in the decisions that he takes for your future. That is your mother's primary function, because Allah has created her and designed her such. I mean, I've got some kids who are teenagers, and if we're going somewhere, the mother was, phone, did you do that? I said, leave them. But that's the instinct of a mother. I said, they're big, they can understand. They must wear a jacket if it's cold. They must warm the food and not eat cold food. But the instinct of a mother is to obsess, is to fuss, is to constantly check, even after you're married. Even after you become a parent yourself, even after you become a grandparent yourself, that's the nature of a mother. And that is the beauty of a mother. A father is somewhat meant to be a little emotionally detached so that he can make the tough decisions, the firm decisions. A mother is sometimes too emotionally invested to make the right decisions, even though they may be unpopular. That is how Allah has created the balance between the husband and wife. The relationship ought to be complementary, not competitive. Acknowledge your father. He's the middle door to Jannah. In his pleasure is the pleasure of Allah. no doubt because of the physical labor and difficulty that your mother has gone through, the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Ummuk, Ummuk, Ummuk. Then he said, Abuk. But that is not a license to undervalue your father. You've got to adequately acknowledge him. Sometimes, he comes home, he's moody. Sometimes he comes home, he's tired. But what has tired him? What is the frustration that he dealt with that made him moody? For who? To pay whose school fees? To pay whose medical bills? To fund whose education? So in Islam, everything is in its place, that balance, that perspective. So parents, and especially the father, I'm not in any way diminishing the mother, but the mother's rights are more often spoken about as compared to the father's rights. So secure Jannah under your mother's feet and secure the key to Jannah via your father. Do both and do justice to each. And then your spouse. Very, very rarely do we think of our spouses as family. Think about it. Because your spouse, by definition, doesn't share the same bloodline as you, right? Immediate. It will, at best, be a second cousin, but it can't be a sibling. It can't be a parent, or it can be, from your progeny. But your spouse is the closest family that you can get. It's the most intimate relationship. One day I asked the late Maulana Yunus Patel Rahmatullah, I said, Hazrat, why do we have so many divorces? So he said, look, different people will give different reasons. Finance, compatibility, lack of tolerance. He said, but all of that is secondary. Primary is the lack of taqwa. Why? When you have taqwa, Allah blesses you in all of your relationships. And your most intimate relationship will be blessed the most, your marriage. And when you don't have taqwa, the hadith says, when you see turbulence in your relations with others, it's time to check your relationship with Allah. Then Allah withdraws His blessings, and the first relationship to suffer is the most intimate, which is your marriage. That's why the ayat recited in the khutbah masnoona at the time of nikah don't have anything to do with nikah. It have to do with taqwa. Because that is the magic ingredient. No matter how in love you are, how compatible you are, because so many times couples themselves will say, we quarrel, but we don't know why we're quarreling, because we love each other. Now, some degree of quarreling is normal, even in the best of marriages. Like some degree of turbulence, even on the best of planes with the best of pilots. But if now the plane is starting to crash, that is not normal. That is not normal. So, again, that's a topic all on its own, but I want to bring in that aspect of emotion. Today, unfortunately, our homes have become like hotels. When you check into a hotel, if you are in room 201, there's someone in room 202. You share the same wall. You're entering from the same door, exiting from the same door, you're eating in the same dining hall, but you don't even know who the person is in 202 if you are in 201. You have no connection with them. Today, we're more connected to the Wi-Fi than we're connected to each other. There's a friend of mine, young alim, he gave a talk on hospitality. So he said, back in the Gaum, when a person used to walk through the door, you on the kettle, or you put the kettle on the stove, chai. He said, today when he walks through the door, first thing you must give him Wi-Fi password. As soon as he walks in, you need the Wi-Fi password? Okay? They say, when we were growing up on a Saturday night, if your father didn't see you in the house, he was worried. Now on a Saturday night, if the father doesn't see you out of the room, he must be worried. If you're looking for your kids and you can't find them, switch off the Wi-Fi. They'll all come crawling out. Abba, hit reset. Now in South Africa, we have this load shedding problem, right? So when it's just started 3-4 years ago, the first concern of the woman, my freezer. Because that's my war chest. I got samosas for next Ramadan in there already. That, the food mustn't go off. No, but now, the first thing that they started to sell was a backup power for the Wi-Fi router. That when the lights go, forget your fridge and your freezer and all of those things, you can survive. That Wi-Fi for 2 hours of load shedding or 4 hours of load shedding, how do we survive without Wi-Fi? So we're more connected digitally than we're connected emotionally. I say this joke and I'll share it with you always. He's a friend of mine. He says, Maulana, I am your typical couch potato. So when I come home, I sit like a badshaw on my couch and I just command. I want this and I want that and I want that. So he says, there was a time I would come and I would be relaxing and my feet would be up and I'd say, Pani! And my wife would come with one glass and my son would come with one glass and my daughter would come with one glass. He says, but of late I notice I make water, nobody's replying. Because wife is on Instagram. Son is with the Xbox. Daughter is with the PlayStation. So he said, I changed my tactics. Now if I'm lounging and they're all in their own corners and I want water, I go on the family WhatsApp group, I type water, 3 glasses coming. You see, good marriages are either failing or they're not producing the maximum results that they can produce because of emotional distance, not physical distance. It's not lack of finance as much as it is lack of connectivity. That's why, until not too long ago, we were worried about marriages breaking in the first year or in the second year or in the first 6 months. Now we're starting to see an increase. I'm talking about my community, right? Of people getting divorced post 60 because of the emotional disconnection. It's not that the man is bad or the woman is bad, it's just that they've allowed themselves to drift into different orbits and fears of life. You've got to guard your fundamental assets. Like in life, you guard your house, you guard your car, then everything else. Because those are your fundamentals for physical prosperity. For emotional, mental and spiritual prosperity, it's your relationships. And today in the quest for material progress, we are compromising our relationships only to realize on the other side of that material progress, it means nothing without your relationships. How many a man I've seen slogging away, no time for the kids, no time for the spouse. Why? Not for himself. I want to buy them the best of houses, the best of careers, the best of holidays. Then when all of them are settled and I've put up the kid and each one's got his own house and I've bought a business for this one and I've set that one up, then I'll take the dohi and we'll go and furry. But by that time the dohi got cancer and she's gone. Now the second wife furries with you everywhere and your children begrudge her that she's enjoying the fruits of my mother's labor and sacrifice. And even if you both reach the other side, you're too emotionally disconnected now to enjoy each other's company. You get so caught up in your own rat race that you can't find the 5 minutes to tuck your kid into bed. Now when you have the time on the other side of 50 or 60, your kid doesn't have the time because he's caught in the rat race of his life. So you overcompensate by overindulging your grandchildren. Why? Because what you're supposed to have done and did not do for your children, that guilt now comes back and you overindulge your grandchildren. It's a known thing. When the parents are cross, where do the grandchildren run for security? Like to daddy, no, don't eat him, no, just leave him. You come sit here, your father won't come, he won't do anything. That's just the irony of life. You see, today everyone is searching for happiness, but happiness is found fundamentally. It's a different talk which I give, but happiness is found fundamentally in 4 things. In your faith, first and foremost. Secondly, in doing for others more than you do for yourself. Thirdly, in your relationships. Your reservoirs of happiness are relationships, not material things. And fourthly, by investing in yourself. Today we have become so absorbed in the pursuit of material things that forget others, we've forgotten ourselves. We've forgotten ourselves. So we don't give ourselves the opportunity to grow and to blossom. We don't connect with nature. We don't declutter our mind. We're all the time absorbed. And you're not designed for the dopamine effect constantly with the WhatsApp. And we're all equally guilty. Myself included. How many times the wife will catch me out, she's talking, I'm making what I said. So, why are you asking me what I said? I know what you said. No, just tell me what I said. Finish. You don't know. You were not listening. There's a difference between hearing and listening. You look at the tafsir of the ayah, فَاسْتَمِعْ لِمَا يُوحَى. Here the Mufassirin have written the different. Hearing is absorbing sound. She's saying something, you listen, yeah. Listening is a different matter. And human beings generally just want to be heard. There's that book, you may have heard of it, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. One of the things they write there is man, Allah has created man such that you are solution orientated. So if there's a problem, you want a solution. Women are not solution orientated, they need to vent the frustrations of their emotions. So like I explained to you, in South Africa, we have domestic help. Every house has got it. So the domestics iron the clothes. Right? Now sometimes they burn that cloak that the wife made 7 tawafs in Zamzam towers to find, the branded Sharqiya one. So the husband will come home the first day and the wife will say, you know what, how many minutes for Maghrib? The wife will say that she burned my cloak. And then the husband will say, fire her, dismiss her. The wife will just look at him. After 3-4 months, same thing. But I told you to fire her. You don't understand. But what do I understand? Simple. You got a problem. She's not ironing the clothes properly. Fire her. Your wife doesn't want you to tell her what's the solution. She just wants to know that you understand her frustration. Brothers, lot can be said and lot should be said. The thing is, we've got to make the time. We are all fighting for time. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he came home at night, Aisha radiallahu anha said, the sun had set outside, but it was like the sun was rising in the house. Focus more on your right, on your responsibilities, not your rights. The problem with families today, we want others to fulfill our rights, but we're not fulfilling our responsibilities. Allah won't ask you whether they fulfill your rights. Allah will ask you whether you fulfill their responsibilities. Stop the pettiness. Stop the pettiness. If Yusuf alayhi salam was petty, then he would not have been Yusuf. La tathriba alaykum al-yawm. No one can do to us. Sometimes we say, Maulana, you see, because my brother did it, it hurt so much. Okay. Did your brother throw you in a well? Did your brother leave you for dead? Did your brother sell you off as a slave? Did you go to jail because of the actions of your brother? Did you grow up without your father because of the actions of your brother? No. So if Yusuf alayhi salam could say that it's shaitan that came between us, he didn't even blame his brothers directly. Min ba'di an nazagha ash-shaytanu bayni wa bayna ikhwati. If Yaqub alayhi salam could have said that you separated me from my Yusuf to the extent that I lost my eyes, I will never forgive you. No. Not only did he forgive them, he said, Sawfa astaghfiru lakum rabbi. I'll ask Allah to forgive you. You know, the Mufassirin have written that Yaqub alayhi salam knew that his sons were responsible for what happened to Yusuf long before. But he knew that if he kicked them out, it would be worse for their iman than if he kept them in. That is the right of your children also. They do the worst of things, but you've got to make the toughest of decisions. Imagine the heart of Yaqub alayhi salam, his favorite son. He knew that they're lying. You separated. Worse than the death of a child is not to know where the child is. And what is the condition of the child? Yusuf alayhi salam, Yaqub alayhi salam cried because he was worried that the iman of my Yusuf must not be less than that which is befitting the son of a Nabi. He knew for sure he was alive because of the dream. But he did not act against his own children who were responsible for that behavior in a way that would have compromised their future in this world as well as in the akhirah. And that's why it all ended up in a happy ending. Because the father had that maturity to be able to take the right decisions. Family is everything. I'll conclude with this. The richest man in our country, they one day interviewed him and they asked him that, what is your net worth? He said, my mother, my wife and my children. Everything else is nice to have. You will work for the company for 50 years. When the new youngster will come on the block, they'll retire you with a farewell dinner. You'll make imamat for 50 years. When the young alim comes and his voice is better than yours and his tune is better than yours, they'll give you one watch and they'll give you one umrah trip and they'll retire you also. But that's not the fault of the organization, it's not the fault of the company, because they have to make decisions in the interest of the company. It's your fault if for the sake of the company you neglected your family. Lastly, they did survey of people throughout the world and they asked them, what's your greatest regret? These were men in their 50s. And they said, my greatest regret, I spent too much of time on work and too little time with the family. I'll leave you with this anecdote. A man got a job as a woodcutter. He cut 5 trees the first day. The boss told him, no one has cut 5 trees in one day. He started thinking, well, if I do 6, I'll get a promotion. If I do 7, I'll get a HOD position. He came the next day early, worked harder, went later, only managed 4. Third day, even earlier, even harder, even later, only 2. He came down to 1. He was now embarrassed that from 5, I came down to 1, given his resignation. But his boss was not a boss, he was a leader. He said to him, listen, you're a good worker. You made one small but critical error. The first day when you chopped 5 trees, your axe became blunt, you forgot to sharpen it. The next day you chopped 4, it became even more blunt, you forgot to sharpen it. The third day you chopped 3, it became even more blunt, you forgot to sharpen it. You need to sharpen your axe to continue to progress in your life. Sharpening your axe in this life is looking after your relationships, looking after your family. May Allah grant me and all of us the tawfiq. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.